Page 25, Tractate Bava Kamma. We're going to study the subject of dayo, which means enough. We'll explain later. We'll start at the Mishna, page 24b, 11 lines from the bottom of the page. Shor hamazik birshut hanizak keitzad. Ox, the damage in the property of the injured party, which we mentioned earlier, the Mishnah, on page 15b. Nagach, nagaf, nashach, ravatz, ba'at. That Rashi explained, it's all a category, subcategory of keren, of goring, which is gored, pushed, beat, squatted upon, and kicked another animal in the public domain. Birshut harabim, meshalem chatzi nezek, half damage. Birshut hanizak, Rabbi Dr omer nezek shalem, achomrim chatzi nezek. If it was in the injured property, meaning the ox did it in the property of the injured, so Rabbi Dr said it's need to pay a full cost, and the sages said a half, which means all the other, the same as all the other cases of goring. Now you see a negotiation between Rabbi Dr and the sages. אמר לרבי טרפון, ומה במקום שהקל על השן ועל הרגל ברשות הרבים שהוא פטור, החמיר עליהם ברשות הניזק לשלם נזק שלם. If you talk about the damages of shen and regel, we explained in a previous dapim, shen meaning the way that the animal eats, regel the stepping and cause the damage. So if it's in a public domain, the owner exempt totally from payment. But when it's come to the injured party, we need to impose full payment. Place that the goring needs to pay in a public domain a half the damage. The owner is responsible for pay half the damage. In no din shenachmir alav birshut hanizak leshalem nezek shalem. How much so that we impose upon the owner in the damage of the injured party to pay a full. That's the rule of kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer, it means if you have in one place that you put the stringencies. For example, here in the injured parties, more than the others, so how much so the others? Amrulo, the sages respond to Rabbi Dr, dayo laba min adin liyot kenidon. So they hold that it's sufficient for the conclusion that emerges from the kal v'chomer inference to be like the source. So it meaning like Acha cannot be stricter with the inference than it's in the case that serves as the source of the inference. It means that that's a limitation. We circumscribe the kal v'chomer. That's brighter. We study in the several places. One of them, it's the next page, which means that the kal v'chomer only haba min adin, something that we have derivative, we derive the chumrah, the stringency, but not to impose more than the current stringency. So he said, ma birshut harabim chatzi nezek, birshut hanizak chatzi nezek. The same was in the public domain. So the animal needs to pay only half. So the keren, the goring, has to be the same payment, which is a half an nezek, when it's come to the injured party. So the Netziv of Volozhin asked a question. He said, all the kal v'chomer here, it's not clear, because what's the reason that shen and regel is totally exempt in the public domain? Because you can't tell a person, imagine some of you owns dogs, etc. You can't tell a person in the public domain, don't take your animal. Because that's obvious, it's a public domain, okay? Versus when you talk about goring, agbalat keren, you limited. So you limited the owner to a certain domain versus reshut hanizak, the injured party domain. So it's applied. You have a shen regel that is responsible for those damages. So what's the application of kal v'chomer? Amar lahem, Rabbi Dr responds to the sages and he said, 25, afani lo adun keren mi keren. Then I as well will not derive the inference with regard to goring from different case of goring. Which means you don't derive keren birshut hanizak, the goring, in the injured party, from the keren birshut harabim. אני אדון קרן מרגל, ומה במקום שיקל על השן ועל הרגל ברשות הרבים מחמיר בקרן, מקום שהחמיר על השן והרגל ברשות הניזק, אינו דין שיחמיר בה בקרן. אמרו לו, דיו לבא מן הדין להיות כנידון, מה ברשות הרבים חצי נזק, ברשות הניזק חצי נזק. The same way as the public domain, it's a half a damage, so too damage classified as going on the property of the injured party is liable to pay only half of the cost of the damage.
In the case of a behemoth that's tum,
Right?
in that case, so essentially Karen is basically the same as regular and shame while they're tum. I mean, as far as the
Okay, in general, we talked about it in the past. You have to differentiate between unusual or abnormal or something.
Right, no, I mean, I understand that, and Karen is, you know, an aggressive action, you know, an abnormal. However, while they're tum, the first 3 times, it's essentially treated the same way as regular and shame, right? While the animal's tum. After it's muad, then Karen becomes correct?
Yes, but you have to remember also, when it's come to Karen, the framework is totally differently. Because if you remember 2 pages before, we talk about typical and untypical.
Absolutely, I understand that. I'm just talking about during
Payment.
the period of time while it's tum, the payment is the same, correct? I mean, it's essentially the same just while it's tum, and then once it becomes muad, then everything changes. When it comes to Karen.
but here we discuss situations like imposing more than a chetzi nezek, even in the case of tam, when it's a kind of forewarning for the owner. It's attempt to try to impose more, because you have to think sometimes at the damage.
Well, that's what the discussion in this Mishna is. But
Right.
ultimately, the halacha ends up
Right.
equating it more to
Right.
during. Okay, I understood. Thank you.
ורבי טרפון, the Gemara said, ורבי טרפון let לדיו, and Rabbi Tarfon does not accept the principle which is enough, it's sufficient for the conclusion to come from this קל וחומר, והדיו דאורייתא הוא. So the whole concept of דיו, we have the derivative from the pasuk, the Tanya מדil קל וחומר כיצד. When we learned just in the parsha, we learned Bamidbar 12 the story of Moshe Rabbeinu and his sister Miriam. She talked to Aaron, Lashon Hara, evil gossip, and as a result she had the leprosy, the tzarat, and they sent her out of the camp. Moshe Rabbeinu prayed for her, and God said that after God rebuked her, she should be out. So, ויאמר השם אל משה, ואבי הירוק ירק בפניה. הלא תיכלם 7 ימים. So he said that if her father was spit on her face, should she be hid in shame for 7 days. So קל וחומר לשכינה, how much so when it's come to divine providence? 14 יום. It is double, 14 days. So it means you cannot compare God to people. So, but the idea is that you impose the same manner of which you impose to regular case of 7 days. So he said that it's sufficient for the conclusion that emerges from the Kal Vachomer inference to be like the source of the inference. So consequently, this principle is mandated by the Torah itself. And that's the idea of Tisager Shivat Yamim Lechutz Lamachane. So Reb Chaim Paltiel was one of the important luminary rabbis in the past generation in Yerushalayim. He asked Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, was the head rabbi. Very hard question. So Frank said, you know, it's funny, but this question was a great early Kadmonim, early rabbi by the name of Reb Chaim Paltiel, the same name, that asked this question, the same question. So here we see the same way of thinking. Why we learn specifically Kal Vachomer? We learn from Miriam and Aaron that she talked about Moshe Rabbeinu, that he disassociate from his wife. So she said, Kal Vachomer, that Klal Israel, when you have the entire nation, that they saw God when it's time of revelation, so they parshu, they disassociate from their wives for the time before, and I am, and Moshe Rabbeinu is always talk to God all the times. So God wants to show that Moshe Rabbeinu was right by disassociate with his family the time that he is merged with the divine providence. The Gemara said, Ki it ledayo, hecha de miprich kal vachomer, lo miprich kal vachomer it ledayo. So the Tosfot bring a Gemara in Nida that said that when there's a father and mother, there are 5 different things that you go. They said that here, when we talk about Metzorah, you have maximum that 7 plus 7 is equal 14, but let's continue. Atam, Shiva de Shechina lo ktive, ata kal vachomer, ata 14, vata dayo pig Shiva vo כשבעה, והלך החצי נזק כתיב, ואתה קל וחומר ואתה חצי נזק אחרינה, ונעשה נזק שלם, ידרש דיו, יפריך לי קל וחומר. So the brother-in-law of the Imre Emet, the dear Rebbe, he asked him a question. It was one of the early Gdolei HaRishonim, early rabbi. So it's Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGola. So he experienced several terrible tragedies in his life. One of the hardest things that he had to endure was when his own son converted to another faith. So Rabbeinu Gershom set Shiva for his son for 14 days. So the Oz Zarua and many other Rishonim explained that he said 7 days for his son. And then he said 7 days in honor of the Shekhinah. So the Imre Emet wondered about this, because we find here in our Gemarrah, in Bava Kamma 25, that you see, although Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, should really have remained out of the Machaneh of the camp for 14 days, twice as much as a daughter who was repudiated by her biological father, she was only secluded for 7 days. So this is one of the Talmudic principle that we call dayo.
Wasn't that the
which
merit of Moshe Rabbeinu?
That's midrash.
Right.
But here he explained, the Ozawa explained that this is the principle of dayo, which means that it is enough. So similarly, Rabbeinu Gershom should not have been more stringent than the normal case of Shiva, which is the 7 days. But the Likutei Yehuda, he said that he brought, he says, my brother-in-law, which is the Rav Levin, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, he said that he gave a very satisfactory answer to this question. He explained that only God himself can forego his honor and limit what is due. We cannot do this our own. God himself should say, dayo, it's enough, to the suffering around the world. But the idea, the way we understand, he couldn't take the suffering, the sorrow. So the whole idea is the כבוד השכינה. He felt that it's כבוד השכינה, that's the idea. Anyway, ורבנן שיבה דשכינה כתיבי, תיסגר 7 ימים, ורבי טרפון ההוא תיסגר דדרשינא דיוהו. Okay? ורבנן כתיב קרא אחינא ותיסגר מרים. So you see here, I said Miriam was shut up outside of the camp 7 days. So that's a clear time that when they have the Shekhinah rebuke, so that's the without the Kal Vachomer from the admonition from her father. So ורבי תרמון ההוא בעלמא דרשינן דיו, שלא תאמר הכה משום כבודו של משה, that Moshe Rabbeinu pray for the healing of his sister Miriam, אבל בעלמא Lo, so kamashmanan. The yo is all the Torah. So the Rav of Ostrovsta, he explained, the pasuk said, "Ve'avi yarok yirak befanea." So he asked a question, what this has to do with her father? So the Rav of Ostrovsta explains, bring a Chazal, bring the sages midrash that said that even before Moshe Rabbeinu, when Amram, the father of Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, when originally he disassociated from his wife. So the midrash said that Miriam said, "Gzeratcha, Daddy, you decree it's severer than Pharaoh. Pharaoh rules only against male, and you disassociate because everybody will divorce the wife Pharaoh Amram." So, lichura, the way you understand it, it's you have already son and daughter. At that time, Aaron have the right to do it. In a sense, you have a son Aaron, you have a daughter Miriam. So, right? So you may say that, okay, you need to have two sons, etc. But when it's come to Moshe Rabbeinu, you have Gershom and Eliezer. So again, why he disassociates? So you can go and say you need Ben and Bat. You need son and daughter. So he explains that this is what Miriam have an issue, because she said she basically was critical in both cases. In the case of the father, ve'avi yarok yirak befanea, right? Which means that he, in her view, did not fulfill, he basically did the mitzvah of pru. You have the son, Aaron, you have a daughter, Miriam. So even there are some midrashim that say that the best is the two sons and one daughter, but he basically fulfilled the mitzvah of fruitful and multiply. And the same as Moshe Rabbeinu, we have these two sons, Gershom and Eliezer. So that's the idea of Ve'avi yarok yirak befanea. That's the Ostrovza. Anyway.
Do we know Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have any daughters? I mean, they weren't mentioned, but...
Not that I know of, not that I know.
But I mean, what's the midrash about?
So many times you have stories of daughters that are not in a text.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
It's a midrash that said about Abraham, Hashem berach et Avraham bakol.
Right.
But Rabbi, don't he have to have a daughter to fulfill the mitzvah?
As I said, the best case scenario is two sons and one daughter. That's
the question I asked was, I said, well, how do we know Moshe Rabbeinu didn't? Because they didn't in Torah, they didn't always mention daughters. There were many times that they didn't mention daughters. I mean, do you think Dinah was the only daughter that Yaakov had out of 12 sons? I mean,
it's a lot of midrashim. I just אמר לרב פאפה
he
לאביי,
did.
והאיתנה דלא דריש דיואף על גב דלא מפריך קל וחומר דתניא. Now we learn the Braita from Zav. Zav, as we said in the past, the men that have discharge. Keri bezav minayin. So how you know that he is metame magar masa, that he is carry contamination of attachment and carryings v'dinu ma betor tame betame, even a secretion, even a rock. It's come to someone who is impure, which is zav, so it's carry contamination, it can transfer it, right? With the touch, with the carrying. Tame betor nodin shi tame betame. So how much so that when it's come to a liquid that is impure, that's come from a someone who's pure, which is the discharge, that it's carry contamination to anyone who touch it, right? So how much so someone who's impure? The same as a rock of zav, the same as the spitting of a zav. So you have the same rule here. So they said ve'amai, and the question is, why is in this case neima ahane kal v'chomer lemaga? We said that this kal v'chomer applies when the contact, which means the zav, imparts ritual impurity by contact alone. The same way as you see the semen of a pure man, and the principle it's enough, sufficient to exclude by carrying. So because we don't see any formulation of the Tana, derivation of these, what we understand, that he rejects the principle, it's sufficient in all situations. וכי תימני ומעשה. למגע לא צריך קל וחומר דלא גרע מגברתו. It's not less than as a person that is pure. So it means you don't need to learn kal vachomer only to teach that carry of zav, carry tuma when it's come to masa. The Torah speaks in Devarim 23, אשר לא יהיה טהור מקרי לילה, ותמין מי שקריאו גורם לו, יצא זה שאין קריאו גורם לו, אלא דבר אחר גרם לו. So it means you have to differentiate between someone that have a discharge during night, someone that have an issue of zav, which in the modern days we must probably interpret it as a urinal issue, or issue that they have a uncontrollable discharge. So therefore, they teach us that this kal vachomer, that carry of zav, carry tuma the same as a discharge of a pure person. So Gemarrah just said midday v'lo davar acher k'tiv. It's written but not another matter. So because you have this limiting clause, it's not written in the pasuk. So therefore, the halacha that the semen of a zav imparts ritual impurity by contact can be understood from this pasuk in the Torah, and there is no need to derive from the kal vachomer inference. So, man tana דשמעת לדאמר שכבת זרע של זב מטמא במסע, לא רבי אליעזר ולא רבי יהושע. דתניא, שכבת זרע של זב מטמא במגע בין מטמא במסע, דברי רבי אליעזר, רבי יהושע אומר אף מטמא במסע. לפי שאי אפשר בלא צחצוחי זיווה, that you cannot have impossible for semen to emerge without small drops of דיבה accompanying it. So, עד כאן לא כמה רבי יהושע טמא לה שאי אפשר בלא צחצוחי זיווה, הלאה ואחי לו. So the Mordechai, just as a side note, said, so something that בא לעולם בתערובות לא מתבטל, which means something that have a ביטול, that the יצירה, the creation, לא הייתה ביחד, so it's only התערבב. Even Rabbi Yeshua of Kutna said that when you talk about this type of rock, this type of spitting, it's somehow combining with blood. But anyway, you know that many times when the people, apologize for, but you take a urinal test, for some people you always see a microscopic blood, that it's not coming, you don't see it when someone urine, it's only come out of the lab tests. So the claim is when it's come to rock, it can be the same thing. Anyway, Elahai detana hu detnan. This is the carry of the Shichvat Zav carrying ritual impurity. This is a Mishnah in Tractate Kelim, chapter 1, Mishnah 3. Lemala mehem, the great degree than the ritual impurities listed previously in the Mishnah, which means the impurity of creeping animals, semen, and one who contact ritual impurity from a dead person. 25b, zovo shel zav, which means you have here a ziva, a zav fluid of a zav, veruko, and spit, so it means that there is a spittle, and veshichvat zar'o, the semen, umemei raglav, and his urine, vedam anida, and the blood from women that have the period, metam'in ben במגע ben במסע, all of that carry a tumah, ritual impurity, to touching and to carrying. So it means, you see that this Tana of the Mishnah hold, that when it's come to zav, semen convey tumah both to touching and to carrying. So the Gemara said, ודילמה להכנמי, לפי שאי אפשר בלא צחצוחי זיווה. So maybe you say the same thing, that it's impossible to emerge without the drops of ziva accompanying it. It's not due to the impurity of the semen itself. So אם כן, ליטני לגבי זובו, משנה דקטן לגבי רוקו, אלא משום דעתם מרוקו. So it's a discussion among the rabbis modern days. You have a Kohanim that flying on the airplane. How you treated? How you treated the airplane? So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein holds, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, he hold that airplane, it's such a large entity that is not accepted ritual impurity, but the Shvut Yaakov said that it's the issue of midras that carry tuma. For example, if you have in those days you have agala, you have a wagon. So he said the same thing as the airplane. Look, if you carry a dead person in the cargo, right?
Sure.
So you have a problem with the Kohen.
That makes sense, but I mean, what about the issue of airspace over like the...
Airspace is different. That's
right, because I mean, because the airplanes are essentially, it's an enclosed, it's an...
I think the last I heard is that El Al is no longer flying over Cholon because Cholon was a cemetery.
Well. I heard they got him to do that, but I mean, my point.
A friend of mine sent me a picture of a fellow that flew, and he covered. Did you see this picture? He covered himself with plastic.
So here's my question. Here's my question. In a situation like that, Ralph, the man sitting in a completely enclosed steel airplane that's pressure proof, all that kind of stuff. How in the world does a plastic covering while you're inside of that somehow add additional protection from tumah? See, I don't understand that. I mean, if the airplane itself is a separate ohel.
What you're saying, if I'm not mistaken, in my best knowledge, that's the teshuvah of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Zecher Tzadik Livracha. But not everyone goes along with that. I knew that Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, may rest in peace, he was asked a similar question. People who used to go to Har as a team, which is across from the old cities, the Mount Olive, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened is, was a Kohanim, for example, they need to go for the loved ones, for all kind of reasons, not to enter the cemetery, but they want to go the path around the Har HaZeitim. Right. So it was asked a question: can they have something kli etz, have some wood on the floor, while
they're not touching?
So they're not touching. It's a teshuva also from him. It's a debate.
No, I guess
the Shvut Yaakov is the one who's the most stringent in this.
I guess my question is how can anyone make an argument that somehow a plastic bag is added protection over an airplane that's completely enclosed in steel? With no air leakage in.
I don't want to mention.
I don't understand is how is a plastic bag.
I saw once in the graveside of, I don't mention name, one of the greatest tzaddikim in the past generation, and is several kohanim that wants to go there, and they constructed for themselves
a fence, right?
like a personal carrying fence, portable fence.
But that's portable
fence, and they took that portable fence. I never saw something like that.
But for like the Balatanyas, that's all they have a fence around, right? So that
I'm talking about a righteous man that was buried in one of the cemeteries, and is a Kohanim wants to visit because they said that the righteous people not carried ritual impurity, so they constructed from them a portable partition.
That they could move along with it.
Move along with them. And I saw it. Anyway, אמר לרב אחא מדיפתי לרבינה, והי תנא, לא דריש דיו, ואף על גב דלו מפריך קל וחומר לתניא, מפץ באמת מניין, ודינו. ומה פחים קטנים שתורים בזם מטמא באמת, running out of time. מפץ שמטמא בזם אינו דין, שיטמא באמת, וכמה יתלה בין לטומאת ערב, בין לטומאת שבעה. והמאי, אימה אנה קל וחומר טומאת ערב, ואנה דיו לאפוקי טומאת שבעה. It's a famous נודע ביהודה. נודע ביהודה bring the Bach, the famous Bach too. He said about Ner Chanukah. We all know the story of Chanukah, that they said that it was a pach, it was a jar, that was found in the chamber of the high priests. So you ask a question, what do you mean to using that oil? Don't you have the issue of the Tumat Zav, Tumat Midras? What is this? How do you know that the idolater did not do it? So maybe that they contaminated that as well. So you can say that chotemet lo zaza, but it's still. So the Nodab Yehuda explains that the high priest was so smart, he put it in a way that Zav cannot pull in his fingers, which means you don't have a tumat eset, because the Torah said clearly, ukli cheres שלא ייגע בו הזב, that it's no attachment, so that's the wisdom of the Kohen Gadol. But anyway, אמר לכבר רמני עלי, רב נחומי בר זכריה לאביי, ואמר לאביי, תנא ממפץ בשרץ מייטלה. So here you have Rashi, that they have two לשונות. The second לשון he used the word כלומר, תנא מפץ בשרץ מייטה, כלומר, והייתנא מפץ בשרץ ודמייטה בקל וחומר. So the way I understand this Rashi is the first Girsa Gersinan Tana Mapatz B'Sheretz Maitela. So it means that the Braita Kitzra Bilshona, the wrote it in such a short way that we can derive Mapatz Bemet. So first you learn Mapatz B'Sheretz that become ritual impurity, and that's what they said, Kal V'chomer Pachim Ktanim. But the second Girsa of Rashi, Tana Mapatz B'Sheretz Maitela, what's the difference between the first Girsa and the second one? So that's Rashi tried to say that it's not the difference by Alfuta, but it's a different. It's that that one the Tana is shorter, and the other one the Tana himself not dealt with the issue of Mapatz Bemet, and after we learn Mapatz B'Sheret, we learn also in Gzera Shava, also on Mapatz Bemet, and that's something that we don't mention in the Braita. That's the way I think Rashi meant. ואחרי כמה מפץ בשרת מנין ודינו. ומה פחים קטנים שתורים בזב, טמאים בשרץ. מפץ שטמא בזב ונודין שיהיה טמא בשרץ. אלא מפץ באמת מנין, נאמר בגד ואור בשרץ, ונאמר בגד ואור באמת. מה בגד ואור אמור בשרץ מפץ מטמא בו, אף בגד ואור אמור באמת מפץ מטמא בו. So the Gemara comment and he said, מופנה. So if you say that it's מופנה, it's this term not free. The verbal analogy, דילו מופנה כלמפרח מה לשרץ שכן מטמא בחדשה. The sherets, when it's come to creeping animal, it can be even in the lintel bark of creeping animal, it's already carry contamination. תאמר באמת שהם מטמא בעדשה אלא בכזית. So again, you have to differentiate between imparted by lentil bark rather than being by olive bark, which is the much bigger. So it's the terms are free, the analogy can be refuted. So the Gemara says, "Lai, afnuni mufna michde sheretz itkash l'shikvat zera." So you try to compare sheretz to shikvat zera, between creeping animal to semen. וכתיב אי או איש אשר תצא וסמיך לאו איש אשר ייגע בכל שרץ, וכתיב בשכבת זרע וכל בגד וכל אור אשר אליו שכבת זרע, בגד ואור דחתיו רחמנה בשרץ. למה ליש מאמינה לאפנו יהיה? אז רב שלמה זלמן אוירבך, זכר צדיק לברכה, have dealt with many questions. One of them it's about hospitals. How you deal with hospitals if there is a Kohen in a hospital and they have dead bodies. You have a large building, and all the Kohanim have these issues. The later Rav Vozner, the Shevet HaLevi, was asked the same thing. You have a Kohen, he's in a big building, and all of a sudden there's a dead body. So obviously people think that he should run away. But the problem with running away from the building is that the entrance carry a ritual impurity. So he said sometimes it's even better, it's depending on the circumstance. It's even better that the Kohen should close himself in that room. Or for example, if you make a kufsame even, he said, if you make a box of stone, so then tum'ay na bokat v'yotzet, the ritual impurity will not comes out. But and therefore, it's when it's come to tumat midras, you don't have that issue. But anyway, v'akate mufne mitzad echadu, anicha leman damar, this will be good by the one who said mufne mitzad echad lemedin v'meshivim shafir, leman damar lemedin mushivim ma'ika lemeima. So Gemara said, demet niyama yifnu mufna, mik demet ishkash lichvat zera, וכתיב הנוגע בכל טמא נפש או איש אשר תצא ממנו שכבת זרע, וכתיב בשכבת זרע וכל בגד וכל אור אשר עליו שכבת זרע, בגד ואור תחתיו רחמנא באמת, למה ליש מאמינה עליו פנוי ומופנה בשני צדדים. הניחא למד אמר דון מינה ואור כבאתרא, למד אמר דון מיני ומינה מעיקה למימר, אמר רבא, אמר קרא וכיבסתם בגדיכם ביום השביעי. The Torah said, you shall wash your garments on the 7 days. So you derive from that, כל טומאות שאתם מטמאים באמת לא יהיו פחותים משבעה. Any ritual impurity, items that you render impure due to the contact with the corpse, must remain impure for a period of no less than 7 days. So since it has been inferred that the mat is susceptible to the impurity imparted by a corpse, it automatically falls into the same category of other items, similarly rendered impure by a corpse and must remain impure for a period of at least 7 days. So some people ask about sukkah. We have now those mats that use for sukkah. Schach. Some people using just the branches, right? But branches is disappearing. People using ready-made mat, and that's it. So the question is, where is from? It's from China, from Thailand,
Right.
all of that. So now the problem is, what did they do? Why they manufacture it? They manufacture for people to sit on that, right? So there's a lot of issues. One of them is Tumat Midras. That they made it for the Tumat Midras. So if the Tumat Midras is not fitting for schach, so it's a tshuva for Chelkat Yaakov. Chelkat Yaakov tried to say that he tried to make a big chidush, that is the differentiation between holchim, people walk, or people sit or sleeping on that. So he said if people sitting or sleeping is different, but if people walking, it's not a problem. But nowadays, people even ask about the chutim, the strings that hold it. But then they see the new schachs that made by people who was Shomrei Torah or mitzvot, that the right people, that the right outside of the box, that it's for sure not from those places, it's not places that idol worshipping in those places, and not the issues of Tumat Midras, etc. Those kosher schachs, including the chutim, the strings that hold them.